Hello, everybody. My name is Rachel Crowley. I'm a senior music education major at Arkansas Tech University. This semester, I've been doing an independent study with Dr. Jim Daughters over special education in the music classroom. I've been wanting to do this since my sophomore year of college. And sort of what kick-started that for me was as I was growing up, my dad actually had a special education student in his music classroom. And I sort of got to see what he did for that. And when I got into college, and the higher up I've gotten into my education classes, I realized that we don't talk about that as in depth as I feel like we should as educators. And that's going to be something that we come across, and most people aren't that prepared for it. So I decided to do this so I could be prepared and then help share this information with my colleagues and peers. And this is special education in the music classroom. Okay, so one of the first things you're going to want to do is to prepare. So you're going to want to first talk to the parents, students, special education teachers, adult assistants, counselors, occupational therapists, principals, pretty much anyone that deals with that student, just to get their insight and maybe talk to them about that student and their triggers, or like anything that they can tell you is going to be important. Next, you want to observe the student in the cafeteria, on the playground, in their classes, anywhere that they have free time, or in interacting with students and teachers. Then get to know the student and their triggers. It's very important because this is another thing about them. And remember, the student comes first, not their disability. Every student is unique, so you don't need to treat every student like they're the same. They're all different and they're all unique. And then lastly, be an advocate for your students. This is very important. Okay, so the 6 domains of special needs is cognitive challenges, communication challenges, behavioral challenges, emotional challenges, sensory challenges, and physical and medical challenges. You need to become familiar with the traits and specific challenges of each of these domains. Like I said before, each student is different and they will exhibit all of them or none of them or some of them, but you just need to remember every student is different and unique. Okay, so first off is cognitive challenges. So this is defined as the ability of a student to receive, process, and commit information to memory. So what you want to do is you need to gather information on how the student hears, how they receive music, how they remember musical concepts and their understanding of them, and then how they express themselves musically. Students can struggle with input, which is reception and processing of sensory information. They can have problems with retention, which is committing knowledge to memory, and then output, which is the demonstration and expression of understanding of concepts. Some of these students may receptively understand, but they may not be able to process it and reproduce it expressively. Then cognitive modifications and adaptations that you can do in the classroom is you can get a rope and use that to teach tempo. So what you would do is students would take it, they would make waves with the rope to the speed of a song that you would be playing. This is a very good exercise and activity for these students because this is a visual representation of tempo and is also an example of kinesthetic learning. So to increase the engagement of students, the ropes can be colored, it can have texture, pretty much anything that will grab a student's attention and then make them be more focused into the lesson. Another thing that you can do with this rope is you as a teacher hold one end and the student on the other hold the other end, and then move that to the appropriate tempo of the song. This allows the student to feel the tempo and internalize it, and they can feel a tempo change, and they can feel what they're doing wrong. And another thing that you'll want to do in the classroom is to provide multiple opportunities and response modes. So this could be repetition of material, material or information be presented visually, orally, and or kinesthetically. This is something that I feel like you should be doing anyway for all of your students, so it shouldn't be that hard to put that into your lesson plans. Okay, next is communication challenges. So some students might not be able to communicate because they either have a developmental delay, their English isn't their primary language, or they may have other neurological or cognitive challenges that affect processing in their brain. So one thing that you'll need to understand as a teacher is the function of communication in that student's life and how it will affect their ability to participate or demonstrate their understanding in class. So there are 4 areas to consider when you're observing them. So the first one is receptive language, which is their ability to receive and process information. The next is their expressive language, which is the ability to use symbols of language to express their thoughts. And then there's cognitive functioning and processing. And then lastly, their cultural use of the language. So this could be cultural influences and students' different experiences with their own language and culture. Another good thing would be to consult frequently with professionals. Okay, so communication modification and adaptations would be maybe giving students maracas to shake to the tempos to different songs. So the student would shake it fast when the tempo is fast and then slow whenever the tempo is slow. Some of the students may need help with this and may have problems with the slower tempos. So you could use different instruments to help compensate for this, and the students may be able to feel the tempo better with those instruments. Another thing would be to have the student move around in this activity. This will provide a physical experience for them. And another thing that you could use is something called Picture Exchange Communication System. This is a board maker program that students can use to express their needs and choices. And all what they do is they just click a picture, and then that picture will show you what their choice or their needs are at that time. So this will help allow students to choose fast or slow tempos. So they just choose that fast tempo picture or that slow tempo picture. And then another modification would be to focus on the language components when delivering instruction. Okay, so next is behavioral challenges. So behavioral challenges become more evident in secondary education. So they'll be caught later on. This doesn't mean that their intelligence level is different from other students. It just means that they tend to fall behind due to lack of social and coping skills. Every student at some point shows behavior that is deemed inappropriate. So some things you'll need to think about is, has it happened before? Is it considered inappropriate for their age and gender? Is it inappropriate? Is it interrupting the student's learning? Or is it external or internal? And then are they interrupting other students' learning? If it's yes to any of these or all of these, you need to consult the special education professional at your school and talk to their parents and then their other teachers. With students with behavioral challenges, you want to look at both the positive and negative behavior that they're exhibiting. Teach appropriate behaviors that aren't in the student's repertoire. So this is where you're going to need to be a good role model and show them appropriate behaviors in the classroom. And then lastly, you need to observe and identify their triggers. This is very important because if you see that something has changed and you notice that this is what happens before a trigger starts, or that there's a trigger that has just happened, you can help predict before their trigger starts and then help them get out of that situation or help them be able to cope through that situation. Okay, some modification or adaptations that you would like that would be good to implement into your lesson plans would be once the triggers are identified, create supports to enable that student to participate actively. You want to keep them in the lesson. Anything that you can do to help is very important. Create a social story to help student transition to the music class. So this could be like a card of pictures that you give to a student when they enter, showing a picture of them entering the class what you deem is the right way. And then you could use this for doing the right thing, having a picture of them doing the right thing during class time, anything. Pictures help. Another modification would be to pre-teach the lesson to the student so that they know what's coming up next in the lesson, so they don't get surprised, and that could be a trigger, and then they just have a total meltdown in class. You want to help that student be as prepared as possible so they know, okay, this is coming, and I don't need to get upset. Lastly, if a student is hypersensitive to sound, you could use noise-canceling headphones, or if you don't have those, use earplugs, anything to help shield their ears from sound. Next is emotional challenges. Emotional challenges can affect students in one or more of the following ways. It could be an inability to learn that can't be explained by intellectual, sensory, or health factors. It can be the inability to develop and maintain interpersonal relationships with peers and teachers, inappropriate types of behavior, a general pervasive mood of unhappiness or depression, and sometimes a tendency to develop physical symptoms related to fears associated with personal or school problems. Students may have struggles with how or when they express emotions. So this means that they don't have any coping mechanisms. It is very important to see if the student is internalizing or externalizing their emotions. Some students may have difficulty with structure, rules, and social cues. They also can have problems with perceived lack of structure. So some modifications that you would want to input would be one, to help students practice these coping mechanisms, such as modeling a self-talk exercise when they are anxious. This allows them to acknowledge their emotion and then also learn to self-regulate independently. Another modification would be towards the perceived lack of structure. So what you would want to do would be to begin and end class with the same song or activity. This allows the student to self-regulate and redirect their emotions and realize, okay, this is okay. They're going to be fine. Positive reinforcement is key with their behavior, compliance, and academic success. Positive reinforcement helps any student, so this is very important. And then another modification would be to seat the student near excellent students or role models to help with social cues. They serve as peer advocates and buddies. Sometimes the student may not connect with you as much as they would with their peers. So that peer can help show them and remind them what they should be doing, or just model what is the appropriate social behavior in that aspect. This also provides consistent positive interactions in a stable sequential environment for those students. Okay, so next is sensory challenges. This is typically associated with students who have an impairment that involves vision or hearing. Some of these students may demonstrate a hypo or hyper reaction to sound, sight, touch, smell, and or taste. So this means that they could be very sensitive to these senses, or they just don't have that sense is not developed. or that sense is not developed as well. So you need to observe these students in other settings and talk with their special educators and parents. Their main challenge is communication. So a common misconception with students with sensory challenges are their senses are heightened, but this is quite the opposite. Their senses aren't heightened, and they don't have cognitive disabilities, nor do they struggle with mobility and orientation, despite what some people may think. You as a teacher, it would be wise to learn sign language. This could be very helpful with deaf students or hearing impaired students. They may not be all the way deaf, but they just can't hear you as well. So very important to learn sign language. Most of the time in sensory challenges, taste, touch, and smell are often overlooked. But these also are part of the senses, so they also create sensory disruptions. Some other senses that we don't typically think about are proprioception, which is the position sense. This is where the cerebellum talks to the arms and the legs to let them know what position they should take for any task or activity. So this sensory challenge is exhibited in a student when they have difficulty walking, joining in games, and performing. And then another sense is the vestibular sense. This is when our inner ear tells us where our body is in space. It controls our balance and the way our eyes move. So these students that have this challenge can become dizzy, have balance issues. They don't know if upside is down or right side is up. This can affect singing activities, choreography, and marching drill. So some modifications that you would want to input in the communication side of the challenges for hearing and auditory, you would want to implement some speech reading, standard oral communication, and ASL, which is sign language. For the visual side of communication, you want to have oral forms of communication to reinforce visual experiences. So visually impaired students benefit from oral input during instruction and assessment. Some modifications that you could implement would be to increase the font size on their assignments or instructions, enlarge their music, bolder and dark visual materials, and accompanying oral stimuli, such as Braille music. And then if you do make Braille music, you need to learn this because you need to know what your student is experiencing. On the hearing side of the challenges, some students will have different levels of hearing loss. So they may have an auditory trainer, a cochlear implant, or any other devices. Some modifications that you would need to input for hearing impaired students would be to look for when students get overwhelmed by the sensorial information that they're receiving. You would also need to first find out how the devices need to be adjusted in your classroom. So this can help with sound distortion. These students need to have seating preferences, whether it be near the teacher or center of the room, etc. This allows them to pick up on visual cues, lip read, and use visual materials. They also need to be using instruments that carry vibration, that have large frequency ranges and resonant capabilities. The students are able to physically feel those vibrations, and they'll be able to distinguish between each note based on that note's frequency. And then lastly, student interest and choice is very important. You need to let the student be involved in their education and then let them have choices. When lesson planning, you need to be careful with colors, sounds, and textures and materials and bulletin boards and in the lesson. This is for students who are hyper or hyposensitive to stimuli. And as to taste, touch, and smell, be careful with perfume and cologne. Root out BO, food, clothes that are smelly, rosin, and then how the air tastes. These students can literally taste the environment on their tongue. So if they get upset, you need to find out what is upsetting them. You need to be a good detective and root out that problem. So this video right here is an example of how a blind student was able to participate in the marching band at her high school. And also another example of how invaluable and useful it is for a student with special needs to have a student buddy. Isn't it awesome to see how sometimes it can be hard for teachers to reach their students, but how another student can help them open up and help them be able to achieve something that they may have not been able to do previously? It's so amazing. So next is physical and medical challenges. A student's physical condition can affect their academic performance. It can cause them to miss classes and miss school time because they're going to doctor's appointments and going to screenings and have to get taken out of class for things. This has a negative effect on their academics. Students may have difficulty achieving the necessary skills to be independent. Some of these students don't have someone who's pushing them and helping them gain these skills. As a music teacher, you can help these students gain those skills through music. You as a teacher can create a learning environment that gives students the opportunity for achievement and for gaining skills necessary to achieve independence. It's always good to remember that students will have bad days like everyone else, and they may appear fine and then not the next. You just have to keep that in mind and remember that everyone has those days. Also, remember that students may need medication that can affect their performance in school and in your class. Just be willing to help get them as involved in the lesson or activity as much as you can. Then look into students' specific medical condition and learn about it. The more you know, the more informed and interactive and engaging your lesson will be for that student. And also remember, your student may be absent a lot to go to doctor's appointments. Some modifications or adaptations that you will want to put into your lesson plans as music-wise, simplify their part. Take out the things that they physically may not be able to do, but keep the parts that they can do, that they can physically do. It's important to keep them as involved so that they don't feel like they're missing out or that they're not worth anything in the band or in the classroom. You have to help keep their self-worth up. Have participation, still keep them involved. And then create accommodations that honor the students' needs and their musical strengths. Once again, keep them involved. Help the student out. Let the student be involved in letting you know what they can and can't do. Always have the student involved. And then you can have modified instruments. So with this, you would want to consult an occupational therapist or anyone that's involved with that student that can help modify that instrument for you so that they can play and then play it well and get better on it. It's important to help students achieve as much as they are able to. So this is a great example of teachers collaborating and asking for help with a student to help modify an instrument. This band program had a collaboration between their technology teacher and the assistant director of bands. They helped create this trumpet stand for the student with cerebral palsy. With this collaboration, this student was able to play and perform in band. This will do wonders to a student's self-esteem. And just think about all the benefits that music has that this student will now get to experience because teachers were willing to help him and go beyond, above and beyond their duties to help the student. So some classroom management modification and adaptations that you'll want to implement into your classroom is close supervision and monitoring. You have to think about the proximity of the student to you as a teacher, their active engagement with students and their access to you, and then the ratio of adults to students that is conducive to close supervision. So when this isn't up to par, you need to advocate for additional adult assistance when necessary. You can also put students near excellent students, like I said before, who model appropriate behaviors. These students can also help reiterate instructions and directions, and then also help that student with the assignment if they're having problems. You want a student who not only is academically great, but also their personality is great, their social skills are great, and then a student who is compassionate and sympathetic and who will help and genuinely want to help that student. These students need to know that they can communicate with adults at school in a manner that is comfortable and appropriate to them. We need to help create an environment that they feel comfortable in and are comfortable to come up to adults and their teachers and the principal and anyone who works with them and be able to talk to us and let them communicate their needs. As to classroom rules, these should be developed in collaboration with the student. The student needs to be involved in their rules. These rules should also be developed within school-wide standards of conduct and behavioral goals on that student's IEP. This provides a sense of ownership to the student. You need to make sure that you have a consistent application of consequences for broken rules. They need to be fair, and the student also needs to be a part of those consequences so that they will know what those consequences will be if they break that rule. You also need to have a clear set of expectations. Write or draw a picture of a rule on a note card and give it to the student to help them remember that rule. You can create a special signal or gesture to use with that student to let them know when their behavior isn't appropriate. You also need to provide opportunities for students to respond. So Have a specific time allotted for visual, kinesthetic, and oral responses. Use instructional models so students can respond individually, then let them respond with a method that is comfortable with them. So it could be visual, oral, or kinesthetic. Another thing that is very important is to use contingent praise. Don't make it obvious, and don't make them stick out. You don't want other students to realize what's going on, and then that singles that student out. That student may not enjoy that. So remember, make it discreet. Also look at the students' IEPs and use the strategies that are on the IEPs so their experience in class will be consistent with all of the other classes that they're in. This is very important because this lessens the number of transitions they will have. The more transitions happen, the more it affects them. So you need to keep them at a small amount. Number one important thing, check on the student frequently. You need to make sure that they're doing okay and that they understand. Always be aware of what's happening with that student. So some general modifications that you would want to do. These could be used for all of the domain challenges. Make sure students have a consistent place to sit. Don't change it up. Let them sit where they want to sit. Have students near you and near any instruments that they will need to use in that activity. This helps to lessen transitions. Don't physically or socially isolate students from their peers. They need to have that peer interaction and also gain those social skills. Seat students away from visual materials or areas that can be distracting to them. Be caring and compassionate. This is something you should do for every student. And then modality. Oral, visual, kinesthetic, the learning styles. Make sure you use multiple and lesson plans. And then pacing. This is something that teachers may not notice that they do, but they do have a problem with this, is speaking fast. Or walking fast, or moving fast, or teaching fast. So you need to slow down your speaking, your walking, and your teaching. Make sure pacing procedures are effective and appropriate for everyone. This means that you will have to compromise between the general students and the students with special needs. But a compromise does need to be reached so that the students with special needs will understand the information that you are teaching. And then size in the classroom or assignments. The material needs to be larger and bolder. Non-essential information needs to be removed and needs to go. So if it could be simply stated once on an assignment or activity, do that, and then don't have redundant information. Don't have things on assignments or instructions that will take the student's attention away from the core part of the assignment. Have raised textured boards that students can touch. So an example of this in a lesson would be to put up 5-line staff using rope, and that student can touch it and they can see it. Use movement to go with listening activities. Have them dance during a song or make little hand gestures for each verse of the song. And then track measures in their parts or score while listening to the piece. So this could either be on their stands or on a projector, and have them use their fingers to trace their measures. Create 3D figures to represent abstract concepts. So that could be notes, solfege, dynamics, and artistic markings, etc. You could use it for a lot of things. You could have pictures or written schedules to go with oral directions and procedures. And then give students a choice of modality. They can have multiple choices, but let them choose and let them use it for quizzes or performance tests, even in the activities or how they respond to you. And then color. Colored music helps students read the music better. You can also color code to draw attention to details and items of importance. This also can help with memorization of note names, fingerings, etc. Simplify parts and materials. Only have the information on there that is essential for the student's success. So just have, with a piece of music, maybe just have the chorus on there. Don't worry about the verses. Things like that. Have partial participation. Sometimes students will have sensory overloads and they can only handle using one sense at a time. Give them student buddies to help reiterate instructions or help them remember what specific steps in an assignment or anything. Give plenty of time for them to answer a question. So one thing that you can do to help with this is to write it on a board or have it up on a projector. Just have it up, just convey the instruction or question in multiple learning styles. Highlight text and music that the student is currently learning. So like if there's an excerpt of music that they're looking at, but they're only focusing on the notes C, D, E, and F, highlight those notes on the page. Or if they're learning key signatures, highlight the key signatures. Then use simple font with no decorative elements. Just keep the font simple. Another thing is to project material on a projector. Students can also go up there and stand near the image or touch for the tactile senses and touch the information that you are currently covering. This video right here is an amazing example of adults with special needs being able to perform at a very high level. The performance teachers were able to help these students learn music and instruments as young students by figuring out what would help them learn best. This is also a great example of how you can modify instruments or a baton, music, or get any instrument available that your student can use. This shows that students with special needs can learn any concept that you teach them. The information just needs to be presented in other ways. Your hard work means something and will pay off.
I think Resound is absolutely groundbreaking and has changed many people's perception and my own of what actually music as a professional musician should be like.
I think you would struggle to name someone with a visible physical disability you see live on stage who's a musician. My relationship with music, that's a really complex one. It's very much to do with, I don't know, empowerment and independence and sort of self-expression. When I was first drawn to music, I had no way to express myself. I couldn't talk and had very limited movement, and it became the first control I had over my environment.
Okay. Yeah, I know where you are. I'm just having a quick read. I've been quite capable of doing solo recitals and private teaching. Conventional orchestral playing has been out as a question before now because of the issue of sight reading and therefore of access to the mechanism of making music, if you like. Can we do the same again?
Yeah.
The instrument I used to perform with is called the Linstrument. It's designed by Roger Lynn. It's basically a board with loads of notes on it, which are fully expressive, and the sound comes from the computer.
I would say that people tend to have a misconception about the ability of people who have disabilities. I've had a lot of people doubt my capability, not just as a conductor, but as a human being, but as active motivated to push on and prove people wrong.
I think my main emotion was one of absolute disbelief. The word from school and advisors in organisations for the visually impaired people was, well, you won't be able to go to music college and do a performance because it's not a career move. And I suddenly found myself doing what I think I had always wanted to do, which was to work alongside other professional musicians playing at a professional level. And it's going to be quite exciting to work out how that can be progressed with BSO and hopefully follow on organisations and orchestras and ensembles across the country, maybe even globally, who knows.
You've got to take these opportunities and sort of grab them with both hands, because there may not be another opportunity for years or ever.
This video shows that people or students with special needs can be successful if they have a teacher that helps them succeed and help them and treated them just like any human being. It's important that we remember that these students are human beings and treat them as such, and not belittle them or make them feel that they're lesser than. They are important and they can do anything that they set their minds to. So, important things to remember. The student comes first, not their disability. You don't have to do it alone. Talk to special education teachers, parents, counselors, adult aides, principals, occupational therapists, anyone who deals with that student. Any information that they can provide to you is important and will help. Be an advocate for special education students. Help them in any way that you can. Even a little bit helps them greatly. Just be willing to be there for them. And this is only the beginning. There's so much more. Continue learning about it and ask questions. be a lifelong learner.